So we did some videos on how to interpret the rune. We are not yet focusing on the rune names. We will get to that eventually, but first I want you to just feel how they read. So here's what I'm going to do, and you will have homework after this. So you can do what I'm doing here. I'm going to give you one more activity that you can try at home, but this will help you kind of feel how the runes speak. So we're going to take every rune randomly. I have all my runes up here at the top right. I'm going to take down one at a time, and I'm going to make applications. So I'm going to say, well, if I have a person that I love, I'll think of one person or a pet that I have. So I'll think of my little dog Cindy. You want to think of their personality, all right, something that applies to them based on the rune you get. It can be situational. It can just be what they are. We'll go through that. Another thing you can do is not only is it about living things, inanimate things can also take on qualities of the runes. So for example, I could use in this example my GPS and how that applies to each of the runes, or even just something like a garden. I can take the garden outside, and that was something the ancients used. So this would be more modern. This would be something more based on what they might have actually read when they were doing the runes. Okay, so we have our needs here, something that's a need, and this again restricts us. So if I were to think of a pet or loved one, what she needs, I would think that she really needs to be close all the time, really, really close. And this keeps her from really going out and doing things or having confidence on her own. With the GPS, the needs are, boy, I better have a working cable, or let's suppose I go under a bridge. It needs a satellite reception. Suddenly, I don't know if it's the exit immediately after the bridge or if it's a mile after the bridge. Because I lose satellite reception, I have no idea what's going to happen. So I need that satellite connection. With the garden, you're going to need sun, you're going to need water, and if one of those things are not happening, then you have a restriction here. So you need good soil, you need loose soil, you need to weed the garden. All these things are needs that need to happen before the harvest happens. So since we're talking about needs, let's go right to harvest. So if I were to think of a harvest for Cindy, she's brought so much to my life. She's such a happy little girl. I get so much affection from her, and she kind of calms me after a rough day. So this is kind of like our happy ending, what we bring to each other. After all the things otherwise are done, this is what our conclusion is, and we really have a wonderful little human-pet relationship. The GPS, the harvest is, you just punch and go. You just basically put the place in, and you're going to get there, and it just gets you where you need to go. It pretty much always gets me to my destination. So it's hard to live without it. So that's my harvest with the GPS. With the garden, the harvest is basically that. You're getting your fruits and vegetables, whatever it is that you like to harvest. After you've taken good care of it, you get to take it, you get to eat it. The ancients would keep them over the winter, would keep them sustained so they could actually survive. This is about survival for them. So the harvest is basically collecting all that you've worked for. Let's talk about this one. Remember, it had to do with hail and destructive forces and anger. And for her, her biggest anger really is if another dog approaches her dish. We have 4 dogs, so if one approaches her dish, that's where she comes out, and the wrath, the little wrath of my little princess comes out. But also, if I think of this as being a crashing down, when I go up out of my house and into my car, she'll howl. She's upset. This is kind of her crashing down. Mama's leaving the house. If I think of it as the GPS, that would be me going under a bridge. It's that, oh crap moment. Now I don't even know where I am or how to get there. Or if I realize I've landed in a bad neighborhood, or if I realize suddenly my GPS cable isn't working, I don't even know how to get there because I haven't bothered to take a map in my car and I'm lost, that sort of thing. So that's when you start looking at your phone. Is there some kind of Google thing? So this is that oh crap moment. In the garden, literally this for them, this represented hail coming down, destroying, crashing, crushing the garden. And so this would be anything that pretty much is destructive to a garden. So it could be a crop being destroyed by animals or birds. It could be a drought that you just can't recover from. I've had this happen where I go on vacation for 2 weeks and come back, and the garden I've worked so hard for is just burnt to a crisp. So this is basically everything comes crashing down, and what you had worked so hard for suddenly is no longer what you had hoped it to be. So this rune, remember, has to do with man and what separates us from each other. So I would take this as Cindy, what makes her different from the other dogs. She's more happy-go-lucky, she's Miss Merry, she's a little different in personality than all of the others that I have, and she's different from me in personality. So I would take all those traits that I would consider that make her unique and uniquely her. It could be everything from her color, her shape, but basically if you think of the essence of somebody and their personality, what makes them different? Each one of us are different. So if you could take away the physical description of you or a loved one or anybody you know, how would you describe them, what makes them unique and different? So that would be how I would apply this to Cindy. To the GPS, it could be the brand name. It could be the size or the year it was made. Mine is not as flat, perhaps, as some of the newer ones. It could be just basically how it's set up, how each of the pages are set up. If I take it to the garden, it could be what makes my garden unique from my neighbors. It could be the choices that I've made to put in my garden. It could be the way that I learned my garden works to grow. If I put sunflowers next to tomatoes or however it is that I do every year that I've learned to do, it's what makes my garden my garden. This is what separates my garden from other things. You might even consider it the fence around the garden that I've put to keep something like rabbits out, because that is something that separates my garden from everything outside, the wilderness, whatever. It's what keeps my garden on the inside and makes it the garden, makes it mine. All right, so let's talk about travel and movement. So if I would apply this to my dog Cindy, she's bouncy, she's happy, she travels in a very merry, happy way, but also she loves to go in the car. And I would actually also, if I were to consider car, I would consider this, remember the horse rune? So this would be her actually riding in the car. This could be us going for a walk and just moving around, all the things that you do with dogs. This would be, want to go for a ride? And she would get into the car. So this would be her happy car rune. If I were to think of the GPS, both of these apply because you're actually moving. It's about movement and getting to places. So this is about us getting somewhere. If we were talking about the car, it's the value of the GPS in terms of status. So I have a GPS, and if somebody may consider, well, that person has a GPS, I don't have a GPS, there's more status to that. And we could also apply that to worth. What is it worth? So status and worth, this is value. How much is my GPS actually worth? Money, dollars. If I would have to replace it, what would it be? How much is it of value to me actually in my car? Same thing with the garden. This is its value in terms of maybe if I sold my vegetables, what would they actually be worth? What would be worth to get somebody through the winter? So if your garden were to be destroyed, say by hail, and mine didn't, and suddenly you can't get through the winter, the value of my garden goes up, because I would need to share. So this talks about the mobility. The GPS gives me mobility. The garden allows us to move through the winter. It can be me moving through the garden, weeding it. The garden itself doesn't move much, but it could be how it moves after it harvests, who it goes to physically. And if you think of social status, we may want to think of the garden as how it will give us status. How does it rank compared to other people's gardens? Is the grass really greener on the other side? How does it compare to other things that are like it, other gardens that are like it? I may learn things from other people's gardens and say, mine doesn't quite compare. Next year I'm doing that, so you may learn it that way. This may be moving things around in the garden, actually saying, oh, next year I'm putting the tomatoes next to the basil, that sort of thing. We've got our sunny rune, here's sun, and so you want to think of how your pet brings you light and joy, the positive, optimistic parts of that. She's very sunny, she's little Miss Merry, bouncy, she loves to go out in the sun, she loves the beach, so all these things have to do with her positive, optimistic flavor. The GPS supposedly works better in sun than clouds, so I would hope for sun, but it also makes me really happy. It also gets me to where I need to go. I feel optimistic when I push that button. I'm feeling good, like, hey, I'm going to get there. So the GPS in terms of this sun optimism does a great job. And if you want to think of directed energy, of how it directs me to a certain place, the GPS is all about the sun being directed energy, how it makes things grow. So how does this GPS direct me? How does it allow me to grow through the places I can go? It expands my world, makes it bigger. The garden, of course, needs the sun to grow. So when we think of this in terms of this, we need basically for it to direct toward the sun. It needs the sun in order for it to happen, but it also brings a lot to our world if you think of what we get from it, and it allows us to grow through it. It's almost like osmosis to the sun, through the garden, and then to us. Let's do a couple more. So remember, this has to do with day going into night and night going into day, or death and rebirth, or the balance of opposites, or just balancing between something. So this one is about her being super happy, but also being, when I'm gone, being super anxious. So the balancing of night and day, trying to get the dark and the light. And as sweet and merry as she is, if somebody bites at her dish, starts trying to eat it, she's going to protect it. GPS is balancing through night and day. This could be changing from night mode to day mode. It could be I have to remember to keep a balance, that, I should probably keep a map nearby, because if it does suddenly go out, or the battery or the cord goes out, there has to be something to recover with. I have to know that when I go through the bridge and the signal goes down, that I'll come out and it'll come back up the other side. It's the ebb and flow. The garden, this is balancing of weather. Not only is it night and day, but it's seasons. So you think of spring turns into summer. There's certain things that will only grow in cool weather, so you want to grab that, put the radishes in, or the tender lettuce. And then in the summer, when we can do things more like squash and tomatoes, and then in fall we have the harvest of things like pumpkins, things that take longer to ripen. So night and day. So you want to think about trying to keep a balance of going along with what the weather patterns are. Let's do feminine or water energy. So she is very girly. I like putting bows in her hair. She's very sweet. This is about intuition and as well, and the dogs seem to know where I'm coming from, when I'm coming home. My husband says about 15 minutes before I get home, the bird sends out a signal, and all the dogs go running to the window and wait for about 10 or 15 minutes until the car pulls in. So this is all about that, using that intuition, but also her femininity. GPS. It's a little harder for me to apply this in terms of femininity, but I would think in terms of intuitive, it's just and it just kind of knows where to go. It's almost like if you go to a psychic to figure out what's going to happen in your life, it's the same thing with the GPS. You push your button, it's like, how do I get there? So it's that kind of using that intuitive flow of seeing where the maps are. There are times when you have to go around what it says to do, and you're like, okay, it's going to take me off the exit and back on again. So I'm feeling like maybe that's not the right way. I'm going to bypass it and just do what I think is the right thing, and use your own intuition and kind of bypass what the GPS tells you to do. Garden, we're thinking literally water here. You're going to need water in order for that garden to grow. So that's where this rune, I would think, definitely comes to nourishment, moisture, the skies opening up. Alright, so this one is about communication. So we want to think about how we communicate to each other. Pets don't have words, but she definitely has body language and gets her needs met. She tells me when she's hungry. She tells me if she needs to go outside to do her business. We've got a really good kind of ebb and flow in terms of how we communicate with each other. So we have really good communication with each other. The GPS communicates through voice. I like to choose the girl's voice, whose name is Jill, so I call my GPS Jill, and she communicates well with me, and I listen to what she says. So this is how we communicate with each other. It uses a voice, but I also communicate through the little purple line. It gives me a purple line that I need to follow, so that's where I go and communicate with visually when I turn off the sound to my GPS. It's our communication, that visual communication of the purple line telling me take a right at the next corner. Garden has to do with communication. And I would think in terms of this, it would be more like, if you see that the tomatoes are looking really wilted, you know something's wrong, there's a communication going on there, and you try and figure out what it is. Is it dryness? Is it nutrition? Is it the soil is wrong? You can see there's something going on between you and the tomato plant to indicate that something's not right, and you're trying to cross-cultural communicate. And also can be, in terms of gardens, communicating with, because this also has to do with higher knowledge, is learning how to garden. Maybe I want to read books on it. Maybe I want to go on the internet and learn about it. Maybe I want to learn from a friend. If I see their garden doing better, I may want to communicate and say, like, hey, how did you get your squash to do that? I can't get my squash to do that. So then you start communicating and making educational applications to your garden. Let's do one more. So, frozen. This is perhaps if she's sick, she would be stuck in one spot, like ice. For this could be also if she is, she's got, her knees can dislocate because she's a little dog, so that can also make her get stuck or yelp and not want to walk. This can also be if we can't go outside. It's so cold because of the ice outside. If she's out even a minute, she'll start to limp. She's so tiny. And if I think in terms of her personality, when I'm not home, she kind of does freeze up. She is waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting until I get home, and then she opens up and warms up again. The GPS, frozen. I've had many times where I am frustrated because there's a detour and it's not understanding the detour, or my detour function isn't working, and then I feel stuck. I don't know how to get around this traffic jam or this closed road. So, and then I am kind of in a point of stasis and stuckness and frustration. Garden, frozen. You could literally have an early freeze or a late freeze that causes a problem and freezes the garden. It could be things just aren't growing. The plants are too small. Maybe there's not enough good soil or fertilizer. Everything seems stuck or frozen. Okay, so you still have extra runes that you can do with these, so I would suggest that you take your meanings and just say you can make applications to things like a pet or somebody you love, or objects that might be around you. You can choose these particular objects. You can take something like a refrigerator. You can take something like your actual car, anything that you have around the house. A game, perhaps you have like a gaming device that you like. And you can have lots of personality, things that go into your gaming device. So make those applications. This is your first homework, and you can try it. One other thing I would ask you to do is, after you do these, make these applications of the rune to yourself, to you. How would these runes apply to you? How does this rune apply? What is your legacy? What is your worth? We got the hammer here. Remember, we get the hammer, so we can talk about how that makes application. Gifts. What are your gifts? What are your talents? So all of the runes that are there, go back to your meanings and see if you can make applications to you. Also apply it to situations, not only a personality. So perhaps what gives you focus, perhaps what makes you feel victorious. You can talk about what is your creative fire, what is your passion, okay? All these types of things go through one by one and see how they make applications to you. What makes your world fall apart? What is your button pusher? What happens that makes your world crash down on you right off the bat? What is your self-worth like? What is your intuition like? Okay, all these things make applications to yourself. So that is your homework. Take each rune out one at a time and see how they apply to each one of these. This is a great thing to journal about. So you can put them in your journal, make a little picture of the rune and how it applies to each one of these categories. Good luck.